So hi guys,
Sure.
welcome to Spicy Travel Bites Insta Live Dil Se. 8,850 meters above the sea level, 9 kilometers vertical. The same place where you see these aircrafts flying. It takes tons of guts, courage, passion, and fitness to achieve what is called Mount Everest. At the age of 50, when people start complaining that jogging is not a great idea for knees, we have a friend who has it in him what it takes to take the challenge called Mount Everest. I proudly present a very dear friend, ace mountaineer, a very successful entrepreneur, extremely creative, Aditya Gupta. Aditya, welcome to Insta Live Dilse.
Thank you, Saurabh. Thank you. That's very kind of you, very generous of you.
So how are you feeling today? How is this lockdown treating you?
Well, I've been awesome. I've been very happy doing a lot of good work, training myself and my team for various things. So, God's grace, things are looking okay. I mean, we've not been.
Absolutely. So let me rewind your life to your childhood days. When was the first time you realized that there is somebody who loves adventure? Your first adventure of your life.
So, I think for me, a lot of this was at Roorkee University, which is now IIT Roorkee. So, at
Okay.
Meerut, and we both belong to Meerut, and we are from St. Mary's. So, in the schools, etc., in Meerut, there are limited opportunities for these kind of things. But at
Yeah.
Roorkee, we had a club called Himalayan Explorers Club, and I was very active with that. I got early. My first trek into the mountains was in 1986 to Pindari Glacier, and I have seen that trekking and adventure is something which you either fall in love with it at first sight, or you say, "Boss, never again." I have very few examples that I have seen that somebody will fall somebody somewhere in between. It's either black or white.
Okay.
You love it or you hate it, or it's like, or you say, okay, this is not for me, or you'll say, okay, this is the thing I really want to do. So for me,
Okay.
it was the latter, and I got hooked. And every time in holidays, in semester breaks, we used to first go for a trip to mountains or wherever. We've done in the winters, we used to do desert trekking, cycling expeditions. And after that, whatever leftover time, I used to come home.
So all these adventures became your first love of life. That's really
Well,
nice.
after my dear wife, yes.
I,
Because
I,
she
I
was
hope
my
she's
mom
watching.
in Roorkee. She was also at
She,
Roorkee, yeah.
oh wow,
So we were both together at Roorkee. We were classmates in the first year. Yeah.
that's amazing. So normally in India, parents are very protective when it comes to adventure. Like if a sunny boy comes saying that I want to go for trekking or river rafting, so they say no, 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 this is not safe. That. So what about your parents? Were they okay with that? They showed some resistance in the beginning or something?
You know, fortunately for me, my parents as well as my wife and my children have never held me back from anything. Of course, when it is something like a massive or a dangerous expedition like a Mount Everest or something, or I've done some very, very large expeditions on the rafting side, the Zambezi River, the Brahmaputra River. So
Okay.
these are dangerous expeditions also. Yes, there is a concern, but nobody says, "Nahi, tum jaoge nahi," or you shouldn't be going, or what about this, what about that. So that way, I am very fortunate. And I think for my wife Kalpana, because she knows me from Roorkee days, she knows it to be almost as a part of me, which will not really change. And I personally also believe that adventure has a lot to offer to a person, and life and death is partly destiny. I'm not so much of a fate believer, but I think life and death we see every day. I mean, things people are good, and in the middle of their living room they can die sitting on a sofa, and nothing was wrong. So I am a little bit given to believe that if it is time for me to go away, nothing
Yeah.
will be able to stop me.
That's so inspiring. And when was the first time you realized your romance for mountains, not just the adventure that you are made for mountains? Because I see that these days you are doing more of mountaineering. You have taken so many
So I
peaks.
think what happens is I have tried various things. I've tried rafting, I've tried diving, bicycling. But mountains is something which takes the cake for me as far as adventure, etc. Because you know, the experience itself. Okay, there is risk, but also the battle that you have to fight, the challenge that you have to fight. There is no adventure if there is no risk. Okay, so
Absolutely.
risk is where there is mountaineering and where you can go really into the wilderness and there is so much uncertainty. So, like for example, when I did a diving course and we were diving in the Maldives and all, to me it was more like a leisure activity and not so much adventure activity. You know, when you compare it to rafting, for instance, so what happens in the rafting is that mostly you are just doing on your own thing, and then a rapid comes along, and then the rapid is over in 90 seconds or 60 seconds or whatever it is, and then you are just basically chappu chalawing, and then that's it. But whereas in the mountaineering business, even when things are not that difficult in terms of just the danger involved, but you are still climbing a vertical wall. You are always under a lot of challenging situations. Even when it's not so dangerous, it is still very challenging. Whereas most of the other things become, I mean, rafting expeditions almost like become a party. Because in the evening you have a campsite, people are drinking and dancing, and you have a comfortable camp by the river on a little beach. And essentially the whole day you had like 5 rapids, and in the 5 rapids there was some danger for 9 minutes, and the rest of it was just like floating around in the water, jumping in the water, having fun. So to me, that doesn't really, count as much as a mountaineering trip, which is 24/7 of adventure, 24/7 of challenge, and you can really, test your limits.
That's really amazing. I'm sure Mount Everest wouldn't be the first peak, the first summit. I'm sure you would have done multiple summits. So first
No,
summit, which was the
naturally.
first? Yeah, which was the first summit you did?
Obviously, Mount Everest is not recommended to be anybody's first summit because it takes a lot of experience and a lot of first-hand experience about how the mountains make you feel, about how altitude treats you, about how you operate at -30, -25 temperature. It's like a whole night sort of climbing. So that's naturally not the first expedition for, and shouldn't be for anybody. So for me, between high altitude treks and other things, so we did some lower peaks like Stok Kangdi, for example, in Nepal, in Ladakh. Then we did a peak in Eastern Karakoram called Mamastong Kangdi 2. That was 2011. So let's say Mamastong Kangdi 2, which is 7,600 meters, 7,650 meters actually, was my first serious mountaineering expedition where it gets transformed from trekking into mountaineering. So sometimes the high altitude treks can also be very challenging and very, very adventurous and risky. But mountaineering is obviously another level. So I would say that was the first one, and then we did some other smaller peaks in Nepal. I've done mountains in obviously I've done Kilimanjaro twice, but that is all trekking again. I have done volcanoes in Russia, in Kamchatka Island, further east of Siberia. 2015 we went, 2017 or 18 we went to Ecuador. So I've been doing these things, but 2014 I had done my first attempt for Mount Everest.
Okay.
But that year there was a avalanche on the very first night of the climb. After we, camped in base camp and you have your puja and you start walking. So that avalanche killed 16 people.
Okay.
And after the 16 deaths on the very first night of the expedition, the whole season was sort of called off.
Really?
So even though we were there in Nepal for a month at base camp and all, but it was a first attempt, but it wasn't really an attempt because we never went into the real mountaineering game. You go up to EBC, we were camping there, we were living there for a couple of weeks. But eventually 2019 really became my first serious attempt.
Okay.
And after that, God was kind, I have to say. Even 2019 was a dangerous season. 12 people died in 2019 also.
Really?
But yes, there were 12 deaths, and but they were all different. There was not like one avalanche killed a bunch of people. So 2015 avalanche was one of the largest single tragedies on Everest. 16 people in one shot haven't died in any other incident on the Everest.
So I think you ever had any technical mountaineering course or something, because it needs a lot of preparedness, I'm sure.
Yes. I have had. So I have done a basic. So in the mountaineering field, you do a first course which is called the basic course in mountaineering. That is about 28 days. I did that in 1991 in the Nehru Institute of Mountaineering in Uttarkashi. And at that time, for the 28-day course, Saurabh, there used to be a waiting list of 7 years.
Really? So
Yes.
don't tell me that you applied 7 years back. You would have pulled the string, I'm sure.
Well, I had to. So there is Brigadier Gyan Singh of Meerut, who is an Everester, and through my professors in the IIT Roorkee and the Himalayan Explorer Club, so I had to go through him, and he recommended my name, so they took me on board. And then after that, you can do an advanced course in mountaineering, and after that, you can do a rescue course in mountaineering. So basically, there are these 3 levels of courses. I did only the basic. A basic course is more or less a requirement that gives you a decent input into how to deal with the mountains. Advance and rescue are more like if you are guiding and if you are really into advanced solo mountaineering or something. So we are like we are kind of people who will take an agency, who will take Sherpas and all. So we're not like doing alpine style climbing or something.
Okay.
So so by and large, that basic course in mountaineering, I highly recommend it to any youngster or not so youngster who is interested in these things, because I feel that's a life transforming course for a short period of 28 days.
Okay.
The amount you learn in it, and not only for mountains, it is just what they make of you in your head. It's a beautiful, it's a very, very good, very well done, very well run, and very inexpensive. In India, it used to be a couple of ₹100 at that time. Maybe now it's a couple of thousand for 28 days with A-class equipment and food and everything. But it's tough. It's tough on your body. A lot of people leave it. They are very clear. If you will not cope with the course, you have to go back. You cannot lounge around. You can't be sleeping in your tent or whatever. Either you do everything that is supposed to be done, or you will be sent back. So about 20% people were sent back from a course like that, because they really drive you hard. They really drive you hard.
But I believe it's a real transformation. 28 days staying in that camp, doing stuff, and
Yeah. So you start off in Uttarkashi, there is rock climbing, then they take you, like we were camping in Tapovan, ahead of Gomukh we were camping there for 2 weeks. You do ice craft, snow craft, you do a small peak. So, but it's a very good and it's a very relevant sort of course, yeah.
fantastic. And what about preparedness for Everest? When you decided that you're going to take this summit Everest, how long it took for you to prepare yourself? Tell me something about how you prepared yourself for this challenge, Everest.
Well, I decided about 9 months in advance that I would like to go. So it is mostly, I mean, I knew what it is. I am not new to the mountains, so it is was sort of awareness. My awareness was high.
Okay.
Well, I decided first to lose weight. I knocked off about 12 kilos in just preparation.
Wow.
Because I knew that with my regular Lala weight, I am not going to make it. And naturally, there's a lot about cardio, because you have to have a lot of capacity. They're very, very long, like the Everest. For me, the summit night, for example, was 24 hours on the mountain straight.
Without sleeping, nothing, non-stop.
No sleeping, no eating, no nothing.
No eating.
I mean, you have some nuts and some chocolate in your pocket. That's it. Because
for 24 hours.
Sorry, yes. And that too at the summit level, that's the final stage. So it's not like 24 hours in Delhi. It's 24 hours at the top of Everest. So it does take a lot of endurance. It does take a lot of mental toughness more than physical. So in terms of preparation, I believe mental toughness is not something which you can really train for. I mean, you have it or you don't have it. So it's
Absolutely.
a lot about how you frame a problem. It's about your attitude. It's about your endurance. And physically, obviously, you can prepare. So you would do a lot of gymming. I would do 90 minutes on a
Treadmill.
with 15% incline and a rucksack on my back and the
Okay.
weights in my ankle.
My God.
So everything I would do planks with a rucksack on my back and weights in my ankle. So so it's like moderate level of fitness. It's not some extreme degree of fitness that I think, because 98% of the game really is in the mind. It's about how you can deal with just the daily life is very, very rough. It's very cold. It's kind of difficult. So you have to really enjoy it. You have to be tough mentally to not give up.
So it reminds me of Bhag Milkha Bhag, when he was preparing, when he lost the game. I'm sure you must have seen the movie Bhag Milkha Bhag. When he lost the race, he comes back and asks the coach, and then he goes for preparing with the weights and the tough training that was shown in the movie.
But yeah, it was not that dramatic, but yeah, by and large takes the same attitude.
That's amazing. So what was the reaction? Who was the first person you told at home that I'm going to Everest? And what was the reaction?
Well, I don't specifically remember, but I'm sure it would have been my wife,
Okay.
Kalpana.
Okay.
And her reaction, as I said, I mean, we are together with each other since she was 16 and I was 17.
Very nice.
So, so she kind of, ये तो पागल बंदा है, इसका कुछ भी हो सकता है, कुछ भी कर सकता है.
That's
So, but
really
she has been
amazing.
very good about never holding me back from whatever I wanted to do. And it is true that my parents and my wife and my children all have, like in most cases, have a sort of veto power on what I would want to do. So if any one of
Absolutely.
them would have really put their foot down to say, "तुम्हें नहीं जाना है, we don't want you to go," I wouldn't have gone. I wouldn't have
Okay.
gone. I would just not. I would not like sort of bulldoze my way into Everest. But yes, they never did that to me. They never did that. They knew that I am passionate about it. They knew that it's a very hard thing to prepare for. And I did prepare in detail. And you have to prepare for a trip like Everest. It's not only what you prepare physically and mentally in terms of dealing with the expedition itself, but it is also about preparing to not come back.
Okay.
See,
That's interesting.
Everest is a statistical death ratio of 4%.
My goodness.
Okay. So basically, 1 in 25 guys doesn't come back from Everest.
Sure. Okay.
So that is not a very low number if you think about it. 4% is not that low.
It
You
is.
know,
It
1
is.
in
It is.
25.
It is. It is more than Corona in India right now.
Yes, it is much more. So a part of the preparation also is to, kind of, I literally did have a conversation with my family and my children about how to handle things if for some reason, I don't come back.
My goodness.
So you have to be very open. You can't shove a problem under the rug and pretend that nothing is going to happen or nothing will happen, because things happen and then you don't want to be just caught unawares or caught unprepared. So, it's an important lesson in life to match your passion with your preparation. And preparation has to account for different kinds of scenarios. You can't be prepared only for victory. You can't be prepared only for the good outcomes. And that does not mean that your focus is less or you are not determined enough. See, mountaineering is not a bravado game. You have to be very, very sensible. You have to be very
Absolutely.
courageous, but not stupid and not unrealistic. Because one of the important things to prepare for also, this is also part of your preparation, is to know that if you need to turn around, what is the time that you need to cut your losses? Because a
Okay.
lot of people get killed because they don't turn around at the right time. So their body is telling them, their Sherpa is telling them, this is not working out, you are not getting it right, and people still keep pushing and pushing and pushing. And sometimes they don't come back because they just die of exhaustion. A lot of percentage of deaths on Everest are because of exhaustion.
So you have seen the bodies
Exhaustion.
around when you're moving, right?
There are always bodies on Everest from previous years and from the fresh seasons also. So dead bodies are a part of Everest. There is a YouTube video called "The Dark Side of Everest."
Okay.
If anybody wants to look it up, then you will know what it is.
My goodness.
So it has dead bodies. It has all kinds of things, which are all true. So as a part of my preparation, I was also looking at a lot of YouTube videos. Every night, pretty much, I was looking at Everest videos, climbing, accidents, talking, because firsthand, you want to know firsthand and not like filmy experiences, but real people, real videos of Everest. So that is a part of the preparation. You just get familiarized a little bit into, what you're getting into.
So I think the expedition starts from the base camp, right? Everest base camp.
Yeah, so the expedition essentially starts in Kathmandu, then you fly into Lukla, and then you trek to base camp. So
Okay.
up to base
So
camp
when you
trekking,
once you reach the base camp, or how long it takes to climatize and get into a situation that you actually start moving?
see, Everest is about 45 to 50 days.
Acha.
Kathmandu to Kathmandu. Yeah, it's a long expedition. And that is what I said, it's a lot of endurance, because just regular life on base camp or camps ahead is a tough life, because end of the day you are in a nylon tent in minus 25 degrees, and that is every day, and you are climbing at night. So when you are leaving your base camp to go over Khumbu Icefall at 1:30 in the morning, 2 o'clock in the morning. So these are things which are not to everyone's liking. And it's not so much about how physically fit you are, but it is about how resilient you are out there. You know, things happen. I got hurt. One night we were climbing. The first night we went up the Khumbu Ice Fall further from EBC. So basically, up to EBC, it's a total fun party.
Okay.
It's easy, broad, it's safe. There is khana pina. There is tea houses. A menu से खाना order हो रहा है. Pizza खाना है मुझे, noodles खाना है मुझे, ये खाना है. You know,
Okay.
and it's all available. You know, it's all available, and it's super safe and it's super easy. But the moment you reach base camp, it is a 180-degree twist.
Okay.
From base camp ahead is all mountaineering. It's like serious business. And out of that seriousness, also the very first part, the Khumbu Ice Fall, is the most serious and most dangerous part of the Everest climb.
The first one itself.
The first bit right after base camp.
Okay.
So for me also, like the first night we were climbing through this, so we climbing about 2 hours into the ice fall, and it's a very dangerous place. All of a sudden, all of my left leg went through the ground. So it's all ice you're walking in. All of my left leg goes into the ground, into the water below the ice. And my left leg is all soaked in icy water. And the temperature outside is minus 25, minus 30. And all of your leg with your boot and everything is soaked in water. So obviously I screamed. People pulled me out. But then you are in the middle of the ice fall. You can't go to the next camp, which is 6-7 hours away. So you have to go back to base camp and dry yourself up and sort of, then I went back alone the next night. So, things would happen, and there are many other things that happen. This is just a small example. So yes, there is, EBC is one thing, but after EBC, in terms of timing, it takes between about 5 weeks, let's say, 30-35 days from EBC to the top and back.
30-35 days to the top and back from EBC.
Yes, but that doesn't mean that you are climbing every day. That is basically, there are a lot of rotations, because you go up to camp 1, then you come back to EBC. Then you take some rest. Then after some days, you go up to camp 2, then you come back to EBC again.
From 2 to back to EBC. Okay.
You have to do these rotations, and the rotations keep you, because that's required for acclimatization. So it's not like you can just, because acclimatization has to be at different altitudes. So the primary rule is you walk high, sleep low. Right. So if you go up to, from EBC up to camp 1, which is 6,000 meters. So apne 700-800 meter, like, about 2,000, 2,500 feet you climb. Then you sleep there a night, let your body get exposed to altitude, and then you come back and then you sleep low. And after you come back, then you need to rest for 2-3 days.
Okay.
Because of the oxygen level, your body is under a lot of strain. Then you go again. Then you go higher up. Instead of 6,000, this time you go to 6,500.
And again come back.
Night, and then you come back all the way back into base camp again. So every time you're going up and down through the Khumbu Ice Fall, and Khumbu Ice Fall is a very, very dangerous place. And in the whole expedition, you have to climb, you go through it about 5-6 times. So each time, literally, आप भगवान का नाम लेके जाते हो, भगवान का नाम लेके आते हो. And I had seen myself, 2014-16, people got killed in the Khumbu Ice Fall. So I mean, I know what it is.
That's fabulous. I can feel the chills. That's so amazing. So we have heard normally a Sherpa goes along. And so who was your friend in this journey? The Sherpa. And do you get to select the Sherpa? How you get in touch with Sherpa? Or there's a body that gives you a Sherpa?
No, there is no body. Obviously, there is an agency that you hire, and the agency will give you a Sherpa. In my case, because I knew my agency and I knew my guide from 2014 other expedition, so obviously I asked for a very experienced Sherpa. So my Sherpa was a guy called Pasang Sherpa. For him, it was the third trip to the summit. He had climbed 2 times before that. And our main guide had climbed 7 times before that. So these are experienced people. And these are not your Sherpas that you use in your trekking or Darjeeling sort of Sherpas. So these are very specific high altitude folks who are very experienced and very expensive.
Achha.
Like I paid my Sherpa about $10,000 for the trip.
7.5 lakh rupees, 7 lakh rupees.
Yes.
But
so it's
again,
not like it's not a porter thing. It's a specialized job.
And specialized job, and the gentleman has done this 3 times. So he He's something fabulous. I think.
After every experience, after every time you make it to the summit, their price keeps going up.
Acha, it's more like the
Yeah.
flying hours of the aircraft.
हर बार $500 प्राइस बढ़ते जाता है अगले ट्रिप के लिए.
Okay. One
So-
single story from the entire expedition that is very close to your heart.
Well, in terms of just the risk and managing the risks and so on. I mean, I told you a small thing about the leg, but
Okay.
there were two more, and this has got to do with Sherpas itself.
Okay.
Because even though the Sherpas are important and you have to really trust them, but many times you have very bad experiences also.
Okay.
So I had, like, when we were climbing and we were going to Camp 4, which is the last camp at 8,000 meters, which is called the death zone.
Dead zone.
My oxygen ran out.
Okay.
Right? So climbing with oxygen, this is already at high altitude, so you're using oxygen tanks. And we were near the camp, and my Sherpa said, okay, I'll go to the camp and you can come in. I said, yeah, that's okay. So I was going alone. And he left, and after a few minutes, I thought, bada mushkil ho raha hai chalna, it's become very hard all of a sudden. Then I realized my oxygen is finished. So you are at 8,000 meters and suddenly you're out of oxygen. It is a very tricky situation. And that shouldn't have happened, that shouldn't have happened. But anyway, I tried to walk, I couldn't walk. I mean, I was walking, but there were some other mountaineers who said you should just wait and you should get somebody to bring you oxygen tanks. Because it's very dangerous to try because you get exhausted too much. So we did that. Some other Sherpas were passing by. We told them, they went to camp. They told them, then our own Sherpas rushed back.
Okay.
Similarly, on the last day, on the final summit day, our main guide essentially ditched us. Basically, he didn't really go with us because he went with somebody else the day before. One of the members
At the summit?
had, yes. So on the summit, the main guy, because of whom you've gone, because the main person that you have trusted, he went out a day earlier with another man who had paid him a lot of money.
Oh my God.
So basically, our main guide is gone. We are going with my own private Sherpa. So the main experienced guy is that. And again, like a good driver, like a good pilot, like a good travel influencer, for example, how you like to refer to yourself. When things are okay, you don't need anything. And when things are normal and they are fine, then you don't realize the value of experience unless something would go wrong. And then you realize what is the difference between somebody who really has experience and knows the business and somebody who doesn't. So basically you can't rely on somebody new. But anyway, we didn't have a choice, so I went with him. And even my own Sherpa on the way back. So we've been climbing 18 hours. So we left at 6:30 in the evening from the last camp. I reached the summit at 7:30 in the morning in 13 hours of climbing straight up onto Mount Everest. We came back the next day in the evening, 6:30, so 24 hours on the mountain straight. And in the last 6 hours, this guy basically just walked off. So there was a sort of a jam. Yes. So the last 6 hours, I was alone with my last tank of oxygen.
My goodness. When did you find him back? Found him back?
No, he was in camp only, but that you would find him. So by the time you get back from the mountain, you are completely exhausted, right? And what you realize is that with the Sherpas, once you are at higher altitudes, you're very dependent on the Sherpas. So that power equation changes a lot.
Oxygen and a lot of things.
Yes, because you are very dependent on them and they are not necessarily the best folks in that sense. So sometimes we had some very, very rough experiences with Sherpas and you have to tolerate it because that time you can't really, and there is no accountability as such because everything is 100% upfront paid. So there isn't anything that, basically that, Everest, there is no, you pay everything before you go. These are very expensive trips. No, I was just saying that in terms of stories, the biggest lesson, and I'm writing a book on the book called Lessons on Everest, Lessons from Everest. And there are 7 lessons. And then at the end of it, I've added an 8th lesson. And that is what I have called, deceit and disappointment at the summit. Because these are very, very dangerous things. When I came back and my wife and my daughter were there to receive me in Kathmandu. And I was telling them my story. I mean, they were literally in tears. Because this is the guy that my family has trusted. My whole family knew this is the main guy, the main guide. And imagine this fellow is not even there when I'm climbing on them. I mean, this is the guy that people have, family has trusted. So things happen And then that is the big lesson from Everest is to, to expect to deal with the unexpected. What can happen, you don't know. And that is the adventure. That's what you learn with adventure. Life is not predictable. Things are not predictable.
So one thing is expect to deal with what is not expected. Life is unpredictable.
Absolutely.
That is the basic. So during the entire expedition, ever once you felt कि नहीं हो पाएगा, let me take a U-turn. I'm done. I can't move forward.
No, I am not built like that. So fortunately for me, and also to be fair, the mountain was kind to me. And by and large, we had a reasonable trip. Things like that will happen. Once I was stuck on an ice wall, I was dangling in the middle of a 50-foot ice wall. Upar nahi ja rahe, niche nahi ja rahe. But those things are expected. I mean, you're dealing with Mount Everest. What are you expecting? It's not a bloody walk in the park. So if everything was smooth, every day was smooth, that would be too easy. But fortunately for me, there wasn't anything which would really push me to go back or to give up on the trip. Although I have done that on mountains before. I have turned around from summits like 200, 300 meters under the summit. So that situation can happen, and I'm very, very comfortable in doing that. Because as I said, you cannot approach a mountain with arrogance. You have to be very humble. You have to remember that you are nothing in front of the mountain. So you cannot sort of be arrogant about it. You have to be very humble in front of the mountain. So if there is a situation where you need to really turn around and it's not working out, you have to do that. That's a responsibility also you carry to your family and to everything. That while you are taking risk, but within that risk also you have to be measured about. You have to be sensible about.
So whenever needed, you take a U-turn. It's important.
You have to. I have done that before, but fortunately not because I was giving up, but because circumstances are such that you can see that it's not going to work out. And then you have to take that call. You have to take that call.
That's fantastic. So you're writing this book, Lessons from Everest.
I am nearly done with it. Yes, we are already on the dummy pages. Yes, it's
That's
more like a photo, as in a coffee table book.
Okay. So I'm sure you would have clicked a lot of pictures. So how difficult it is to take pictures on Everest, because you are with gloves and everything. So you carry your DSLRs or your mobile cameras.
It is very difficult. That is why most people don't have much pictures, except some professionals who are carrying gear. No, I did not take. I'm a photographer. I did not take DSLRs above base camp because it's very dangerous terrain. You have to be focused on, on the ropes and things, and you can't be really carrying at least I can't be. I'm not that skilled amount. So most of the photography is done just by phone, but it's amazing picture. So it's all by phone, and I was carrying the phone inside my Himalayan suit because you have to keep it warm.
Okay.
So I was saying that the Himalayan suit basically is all zipped up, and I was keeping the phone next to my body to keep it warm. Otherwise, the battery runs out. So every time you want to take a picture, you actually take off your mittens, take out the phone, quickly take a few pictures, put the phone back in, put the mitten back up. And this whole thing should be done in 15-20 seconds, like 15-20 seconds. It should be completed. Your finger is going to get frozen. You get frostbites. So you're dealing with minus 35 temperature. So yes, but it is hard, but it is very well worth it. And I'm fortunate that I have a lot of very, very good pictures from the whole trip. Enough material to make a nice book. And that's what we are doing now.
I'm sure, looking forward to see the book. I'll take your autograph for sure. So now coming back to Everest, when you reached on the top, the first feeling, the first expression you had in mind, what was the first thing that came to your mind?
You know what? The first thing that came into my mind, and this I remember very clearly, I reached there and I did this to the skies. Because these are some experiences in life which tell you the power of destiny and the power of good wishes. You can see there is so much difficulty around. You can see people are dying on the way.
Yeah.
You know in your heart that you are no extraordinary person. I'm just an ordinary chap. And this was one of my things to prove to myself that ordinary people can do a lot of things. And still so many others, and even in our group, many of the more experienced and very strong people didn't make it.
Acha.
And someone like me who's an ordinary chap made it. So naturally there is, you know, you will believe, you have to believe that, you know, your friends and your family. My family was obviously up all night praying for me. A lot of, you know, I was on Facebook, so a lot of people were aware that I am climbing tonight. So I think one realizes in some situations in life what really the power of good wishes is and what is destiny. Because there is nothing, there is no objective reason that many of those who couldn't make it were in no way less qualified than me. They were actually more qualified in various ways.
Okay.
But I made it. The mountain let me climb. You have to know that every serious mountaineer will always tell you, I didn't climb, the mountain let me climb. It is a mountain you pick who will go, who will not go. And the best of the best people don't make it. And idiots like me sometimes make it. So it is like, so that is very clear. Thank God I recorded a short message for my wife and my kids and my parents.
On the top, huh?
On the summit. And then I took a 360-degree videos of the summit. And I took a few pictures. In fact, I didn't realize, but later on when I see the first photo and the last photo, I realized that I spent almost 35 minutes on the summit. Typically, you spend like 10, 15 minutes. 35 minutes because my first and last pictures are 35 minutes apart. So that's a long time on the summit. That's a long time on the summit.
So that was so modest, saying that a normal guy like me can do it. You have it in you, that's why you could do it.
No, I genuinely mean it, Saurabh. I'm not trying to be humble. I mean, you know, a lot of people know me very well. And I am just, as I said, it's a lot here. And it's a lot of different factors. It's not just one thing about how strong you are in the body. In fact, body is only a qualifying factor. Above a certain level, then it's about how you react to situations, about how tough you are to not be discouraged. You know, a lot of people turn around on the Everest, and people have prepared for a long time. It cost a minimum of about $35,000 to $40,000.
For one trip. Okay.
For one person.
So
the expedition, and if you are going with a foreign agency, you're talking about $50,000 to $60,000.
Okay.
So people have prepared, people have paid that much money, but still the very first night you go up from the Everest base camp into the Khumbu Icefall to Camp 1 and back, 15-20% people turn around.
My God.
After paying that much money and after preparing and after knowing what it is. But eventually, it is a lot of resilience. You have to be very resilient. You have to be very, very strong mentally. And some sort of a ridiculous amount of optimism, I would say. Ridiculous amount of optimism. Because when you look at it logically, you will say like, "Meri to koi aukaat hi nahi hai, ye mountain, and like, who the fuck am I?" And then all of a sudden, but you have to be very optimistic. You have to say, "Okay, I'm going to do it." And then one step at a time, make it. I mean, I made it, so anybody can make it.
So I've seen your pictures. When you said mighty mountains, I've seen the pictures. So चींटियों की तरह लोग दिखाई दे रहे होते हैं in front of.
Absolutely. That's very true.
So there's a question from Kumar. He just typed, "What was one main challenge while attempting Everest? One biggest challenge?"
See, again, I'm saying it's an endurance. It's an endurance thing, because things go wrong. You know, your guide is gone, your oxygen is running out, you have other problems. I mean, I fell down once on my knee on a pointed rock. I say, abhi tak till now my injury is not settled.
My goodness.
And I'm climbing with that injured knee onto the Everest. So there is that, you know, in the moment you have to be extremely committed. And those are the lessons that I've spoken about in my book also. Okay. And one of the lessons is that there is a sort of power of focus. And by that, what I mean is that you focus on the goal so strongly that you don't see the negatives. You know, when you're crossing a ladder or you're crossing a crevasse or something, there are paths where like 6 inches wide. But there are 6 inches. Now you can look at the 6 inches or you can look at the 6,000 feet on the side.
My God.
If you will look at the 6,000 feet, you will not be able to walk. You will just freeze. So if you can look at the 6 inches alone and you put your foot and you keep going, you'll cross it. And then it's easy because you're looking at, because पैर रखने की जगह तो है ना.
हाँ.
But question is, are you so strong in your focus that you will see only that spot and you will not see other things? So I think it is a very important part about how you can be focused to the point that you are able to almost be blind to the dangers and the downsides while not being unconscious of it. So you are aware, but you're also optimistic enough and you're focused enough to know that I can cross. And you cross.
So Dr. Piyush Gupta is asking, will you do it again?
Well, personally, I would love to, but I think that would be way too irresponsible.
Absolutely.
So I would love to do it again because it is such a wonderful experience. But I think I should not be pushing my luck. So, one time I got back, I was not one of the 25 chosen. I don't want to take another chance on the same thing. Because one thing that you can see out there, that who will not make it, who will be the one who die, it is not to do so much with your aptitude. It's a lot about destiny. It's a lot about destiny. I mean, that is the truth of it. Because eventually one thing is very clear. Okay, there may be unqualified people and so on, but it is very important because people say, "अरे कोई भी पहुंच जाता है, कैसे भी पहुंच जाता है." ऐसे इतना आसान नहीं होता पहुंचना. You can go from here, and you can go into base camp. Okay, you can say base camp पे कोई भी पहुंच जाता है. But by the time you've done those rotations and you've gone through the ice fall, you've gone camp 1, camp 2 and back, by the time you're really attempting the summit night, that's when people mostly are dying. By that time, you have qualified enough.
Absolutely.
You are there for 40 days. For 40 days, you are there. And you're dealing with everything. You're climbing on ice walls. You're doing whatever it takes. You're going through avalanche. I mean, not through avalanches, but so many avalanches are happening. There's a lot of scary stuff, but you are still determined to go. And you have done all of that. So if you are on that night on the summit climb, that means you already qualified, boss.
Absolutely.
Okay, there may be some people who think they are very qualified and some people are very arrogant about it, unfortunately. But I can tell you firsthand that if you are there on the summit night and you made it to that point, that you are even attempting the last night on the summit, then you've done a lot. You already proved your mettle. उसके बाद कौन जिएगा, कौन मरेगा, क्या होगा, अब ये तो भगवान ही जान सकता है. भगवान ही जान सकता है.
So why do it's always the climb in the night and not in the day?
Because at night it's more stable. When it's cold, the ice and all are very stable. And typically in the high altitude areas, by after midday, once the sun comes up and it heats and the temperature differences happen because there's black rock and white ice. So all of that creates a bad weather in the afternoon. Typically every day there is, even on my way back, you see my picture from the summit, already clouds were coming from the left. And most of our descent was in snowstorm, blizzard, all of those things. So typically in the afternoon, the weather is bad. And at night, the weather is calmer. And because it's very cold, so there is not so much melting ice. Because melting ice, etc., create avalanches. They create more dangers. So you want to do the hard part at night. And also, in fact, it is counterintuitive. Sometimes when you're climbing at night, you're using the headlamp, right? So it is that power of focus. You see only where you have to put your foot. Sometimes not seeing too much is a good thing. Because when you are coming back the same path, like, the next day you say, oh my God, I was walking here. That is bloody dangerous. But when you are climbing at night, you're not even looking at everything. You're just looking at your headlamp. 10-15 फुट का नजर आ रहा है, जहां पैर रखना है वहां पैर रखो और आगे चलो. So, and then if you're looking too much to the left and to the right and, all kinds of dangers, they're more obvious when you can see everything. So sometimes it kind of works out well because you're not seeing too much. You keep going.
Focus and focus. Nothing more than that.
And sometimes you have to trick yourself into getting focused. थोड़ी तरकीब लगानी पड़ती है.
So let me ask a simpler one. So how do you do your toothpaste? I'm sure the paste gets frozen. So how do you paste and how do you go for your nature calls when you are there? Do you have toilets or something?
So obviously there are no toilets, but there is a toilet tent up to camp 2. After that, there is nothing because it's a very dangerous and a very unstable place. So these are very difficult things. I think after camp 2, you're not really brushing your teeth and all of that elementary stuff. You have to get rid of those things. वो सारे
अच्छा,
ideas
खत्म हो जाती है.
civilization तक ठीक है. ऊपर तो you don't even want to carry a toothpaste and toothbrush because every gram matters. Every gram on your weight, on your back is a
अच्छा.
problem.
Oh my
So
God.
you're not doing. I don't think in the last couple of days you were really brushing your teeth and stuff. And absolutely going to the toilet is a hard thing. I would say that going to the loo on Camp 4 was one of the hardest things that you would do. And I'll share with you a very funny story about the toilet thing. So you have to
Okay.
go in the night, and then you're sleeping inside your tent the whole day. And you can hardly eat because your appetite also gets very killed because with that
Okay.
low oxygen and all of that. So the last 3-4 days are really you are just living on your spirit, and your body is literally eating your body. You're not able to
My
really
God.
eat too much or drink too much, and there's no water, so you have to melt the ice and snow to get water, and that is also hard because there's not so much fuel and all of those things. But so I was carrying these wet wipes,
Okay.
to use on the toilets. And मैं शेरपा जब नीचे भी पैकिंग कर रहा था, सर ये वेट वाइप आप ले जा रहे हो ऊपर, कैसे तो सब फ्रीज हो जाएगा. ऐसे नहीं वो मैं मैनेज कर लूंगा, अपने बॉडी के साथ में रखता हूँ. सो आई एम मोर कंफर्टेबल विद द वेट वाइप्स इंस्टेड जस्ट द ड्राई टिश्यूज. He said ठीक है,
Okay.
okay. So I always kept them inside my, inside the suit and next to the body थोड़ा सा, जिससे कि वो थोड़ा सा moist रहती. On the
ठीक है.
Camp 4 at 8,000 meters, Saurabh, it is so windy, it is so bloody windy, and it's so cold. In the amount of time that I took the wipe out of my upper pocket and down to my bottom, that wet wipe was frozen like a sandpaper.
Fuck. Sorry.
By the time it is going on your bottom, it's like you are rubbing it with a sandpaper because it's frozen ice. So I thought, oh my God, but you have to really do it in like 30 seconds and run back into the tent. So yes, it is hard. And also at night, so literally, 24 hours, and you have to be on a rope. So once you are climbing, 24 hours, you can't go left and right, either बैठ जाता हूँ, उधर, no, nothing. You have to be on the rope, whether you are a man or a woman or, there's no, ये सब शर्म वरम नहीं होती कोई वहाँ पे. और दिमाग भी नहीं होता ये सब चीजें सोचने का. So naturally, wherever it is, you have to be right there. So people are walking.
Okay. Okay. This is something interesting.
There is no chance because there is a fixed rope. You have to be on the fixed rope. So it is a funny thing, but anyway, these are very, very minor issues. These are not things that you think about. This is just a very trivial issue. Very trivial issue. So
So what is the percentage of women in expedition? You see a lot of ladies around.
there is a decent percentage. I won't say a lot.
अच्छा.
I would say
अच्छा.
10-15% तो होते हैं.
अच्छा. And you see a lot of Indian women as well.
Yeah, there were a few young Indian women because you see what happens is that the Indian so Indians are the largest contingent out there.
अच्छा.
But that is because there is always a lot of government sponsored trips. So there is somebody from the forces. Like this
Achha.
year, I mean last year when we were there were 3 government expeditions out there. So one was
Okay.
a national NNP expedition, one was a police expedition, and one was another some military academy something.
Okay.
So there were about 88 Indians, out of which I think like private civilian people were very few.
अच्छा.
Most of them are like government sponsored and forces or services and things like that. But अपने private भी होते हैं 8-10 बंदे होते हैं. Maybe between 10 and 12 also sometimes.
So Rahul from Singapore wants to know which is your next adventure trip planned. What is in your?
This year we were going to go to Peru, and I am in love with South America. But obviously this year is not happening. So next year we'll see. There is a lot of I have books and books and books on adventure ideas around the world, and I have like a lot of different kind of things. So there is a world. I mean, literally, I could be doing it 10 months a year for the next 20 years, and you'll never run out of ideas.
Amazing. I was reading somewhere at the Everest Base Camp when they start for the trek. So these Sherpas, they perform some puja, and the prasad is alcohol, daru.
Yes.
So some specific reason for that?
I don't know, but I think in the overall Tibetan culture, daru is not looked upon in the same way as in some of the other cultures.
Acha.
right? So the thing is that out there, it is very true that the prasad is beer and whiskey, and we have fun, and it's a pretty long and very serious puja. The lamas come in. I mean, our photos are baraf pad rahi hai, like snowing hard, and we're doing the puja outside, and for
Acha.
like 2-3 hours. Yes, yes.
2-3
So
hours.
basically, yes, yes. So you basically worship your equipment. So all the
Acha.
gear is being worshipped, and obviously the gods and goddesses are being worshipped. And then there is prasad. They play almost like a holy with आटा. आटे से आटा एक दूसरे के ऊपर फेंकते हैं. Flour,
Wow.
गेहूं का आटा जो. हाँ. And then just fun with whiskey and beer and coke and all of those things. If you don't want to drink,
Acha.
then you have just coke or something. So it is a fun thing. It is a fun thing. But it's a very
Fantastic.
serious affair. Before the puja, no climbing starts. No Sherpa will put their foot on the mountain before the puja.
That's amazing. So, another thing, I know that you're a globetrotter. You love to travel. Other than adventure, maybe a couple of places that you love in this world. Some places that you have traveled.
Well, I am Africa for me is a favorite area as far as travel for leisure.
Okay.
Of late, in the last couple of years, I have loved every place that I've gone to the South American part of the world. Gorgeous places. Morocco was one of my finest trips. Mexico has been wonderful. I've done adventure trips in Kamchatka in Russia, which is further east of Siberia. So I'm an explorer. Mongolia was a fantastic trip. We did a horseback expedition in Mongolia in the Western Altai Mountains. We were 10 days on horses through wilderness. That was the most amazing adventure plus exploration trip. So I am not into, traveling to the US or Europe. I mean, there I have to go for work and all. But
Okay.
that never appealed to me as a leisure travel thing. So I am more of an experience hunter and not so much of a touristy sort of a thing. Which is
Okay.
a lot of people are evolving to that. I think a lot of people are evolving to that. So I would say Africa, South America, and then these offbeat locations, Morocco, Mongolia, places like these. To me, these are very, very alluring. Very, very alluring. But they still have a lot of character. There's unpredictability. I am not looking for fancy hotels and stuff like that. I mean, you can do that in Goa. I don't need to go to Bahamas to stay in a 5-star hotel.
Absolutely.
I can stay anywhere. They're the same things. So for me, it's
That's really
like
amazing.
how individual can you get? How unique can you get? And to that extent, Mexico was amazing. Ecuador was amazing. And that's why we're going to
Acha.
Peru this year. And Ecuador, say we went to Galapagos Islands. Galapagos Islands is some heaven on earth sort of place. So these are the places which actually inspire me and motivate me to make the effort to travel.
So South America is also in my cards as well. I would probably travel soon. So US, of all the touristy places I've already done, so I'm looking for more of these
Exactly. So
virgin
if
places.
you start with the touristy one and then you're done with it, then eventually you say, okay. So Morocco, for that matter, is one place which is not that far, but it has a lot of character. Morocco, I love. And as a design person and as a sort of a design and architecture enthusiast, it's a lot of inspiration.
This Everest changed Aditya in her lifestyle, in her life, in her business, in her decision making. What changes you find in Aditya after Everest?
Well, I have to say that it's a continuum of changes, Saurabh. So every adventure changes. So
Yes, sir.
I was saying that it's a continuum. There is no sort of one clear thing. But I think these experiences all add up to your ability to deal with tough situations. They just add up to your optimism about that, I can handle anything. You can throw me anywhere, I'll come out of it. It's those
Wow.
kind of things where you say that when you stick with a resolute belief that you can do it, a lot of things can be done. And that's why those lessons that I've shared, they're not unique things, they're not new things, but when you think of these ideas in the context of a mountain like Everest, those really become, I have called them brain tattoos. They are embedded, on your being. They are embedded on your being. And I think those are very, very big things. So there won't be one thing which I say, okay, now this box is ticked. It's not like that. But yes, you do believe you begin to believe a little bit more in destiny. You begin to believe a little bit more in the power of focus, in that power of one step at a time. And one important lesson that I got from there is what I call that scale should not scare you. You know, so the
Okay.
scale of your goal,
Thank
the
you.
scale of your ambition should not be scaring us, it should be motivating us. So essentially, you know, on the Everest, you start seeing Everest from Namche Bazaar, which is 40 days before you will climb. So for 40 days, you are looking at it every day, you are going closer and closer and closer. And even on the very last day, it is really huge. I mean, the last climb is still massive. So
My
if
God.
you're going to be scared of the scale of something, of your ideas, of your goals, so I think these experiences give us a lot of self-belief. They give us a lot of optimism, which is just inborn inside you to say, okay, we can deal with anything. And there was so much that was to do with the coronavirus situation. I mean, it happened, you know, and I made some videos for sharing with my team and all, that the lessons from Everest apply exactly as it is on the coronavirus situation. It's about focusing on what you have to do and not focusing on what can go wrong. It's about believing in your step by step, that one step at a time you can do. It is not being scared of the scale of something. You know, it is expecting to deal with the unexpected. So all of these lessons are there. And then there is another very important lesson that a mountain like Everest can teach you. And that lesson I've called to make friends with fear. Because this is one question
Friends
you
with
didn't
fear.
ask, but I got that asked in many other interviews and talks. That were you
Okay.
not afraid? Were you not scared? Of course I was scared. Who the hell can say they're not scared of Everest? You know, fear is not something which you can say, oh, मुझे तो डर नहीं लगता. That's a bloody bullshit. That's lie. You know, it is scary. You are going to be scared about it. But how will you deal with that fear is a big lesson in life. And in a situation like Everest, where you are facing it every other day, you get sort of well practiced with it. And that whole trick is about making what I call as, like, you know, make friends with fear. That means you recognize the fear, you accept the fear, and you say, I understand you, but I will deal with you. I'm not going to run away from you. I'm not going to pretend that you are not there.
Okay.
And, you know, so I think making friends with fear is an important thing. So these are lessons. So there won't be one thing, but these are lessons which you learn, and then naturally they apply in small and big ways as you go along life.
Absolutely. That's amazing. So I think we had a lovely, lovely session. Thank you guys for joining in. And thank you, Aditya. Aditya, would you like to give a suggestion to somebody who aspire to do something, some tips, maybe one liner, get a motivation to somebody who wants to do something what you have done?
I told you, and I've written that on the back cover of my book, that my goal was to prove that ordinary people can do anything when they decide to do it. So I can tell you that if someone like me can climb Everest, anybody can do anything. It's a question of what you decide to take on. And then it's a question of, you know, if you are passionate and
That's
you are
amazing.
preparing that. So the important lesson to me is that when you say passion and preparation is about what are you willing to sacrifice. You don't want to say, oh, I'll do this, I want to get this. Okay, that's fine. But what are you willing to sacrifice to get that? Are you willing to slog it out 2 hours a day in the gym? Are you willing to take that risk? Are you willing to do? So if you are not willing to sacrifice anything, if you are not willing to really, really prepare for it, you know, just passion alone is not easy. I mean, it's not enough. So I think I've spoken enough, and those who want to do it, they know it inside their heart, and then they can do it.
That's really amazing. I think it was a lovely, inspiring session. Thank you so much, Aditya. It was so nice speaking to you, and all the best for your more adventures in life. And
Thank you.
guys, you can stay connected with us. Follow us on Instagram. So, and you have anything to ask, you want to take some tips from Aditya, you can ask him on Instagram or Facebook. He'll be there replying you, helping you out. So thank you so much, guys. That's me and Aditya signing off tonight. Goodbye, good night. Stay safe, stay home. Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye, guys. Thank you for having me. Bye, Saurabh.